All right. Hey, good morning, guys. Well, it's about to be afternoon, but hey, time is relative in this case, at least in our linear time construction. So today I wrote an article that's kind of just very abstract. It may be even a little bit difficult to navigate when you first read it, especially if you're not really familiar with the terms that I'm dropping. Um, but so I decided with this specific essay that I would try to explain as much as I could concerning, what do I mean when I kind of say these things. Um, for example, in the beginning of this essay, I say something like, the friend does not exist if it is predicated on a lack emergent relationship. The symbolic cultural significance of the boyfriend is the full actualization of the lack emergent connection. So I just introduced this term, and I know I briefly talked about it in one episode, not one episode, but one video of mine later. But the whole what lack emergence means essentially is basically what it should mean in the very word itself. But if I were to just kind of explain this on a deeper level, what I mean when I say the friend does not exist if it is predicated on a lack emergent relationship, I am talking about how when there is a friend, right, a friend that claims to be a friend but secretly wants more than what is allowed. So, for example, and I actually dropped this term, the friend zone, right? The friend zone, you could say, is that zone of the lack emergent relationship where the subject, the male subject, in this case, I'm using heterogeneous relationships as an example here. The male has a lack because he wants the desired object, right? But the desired object, which is the female, bars him from getting there, right? But what I'm saying is the friend, an actual friend, cannot be predicated on this lack emergent relationship. That means that the one that claims to be a friend, that who's in the friend zone, is not actually a friend. He's just a subject that got barred from reaching possession, essentially, right? So being barred from reaching possession is essentially what I mean by uh, the friend zone, right? And this is obviously a popular cultural term, but I kind of turned this term into like a kind of a philosophical concept, almost like a very Kantian concept, where the friend zone is where the subject is barred from another subject, right? And you cannot actualize the possession, but you desire possession. Um, and then I move into the boyfriend, the concept of the boyfriend, where the boyfriend is the actualization of this lack emergent relationship. But what I end up showing in the essay is that the lack emergent relationship is only predicated on possession, right? And this is the fantasy. The fantasy is possession itself from controlling the representation. And so to put this in like the most simple way possible when explaining this concept is that in male culture, there is this understanding that you are a how can I put this? In male culture, if you're the guy that gets friend zoned, you're sort of like, you have a lack of you're sort of lacking as a male. Like you're lacking. You weren't able to achieve winning over the female, basically, right? But if you're the boyfriend, there is something prideful about that in male culture because you were able to successfully win over and possess the desired object, which is the female in this case, the female that is in pursuit. But what's ironic about this whole thing, and I write this in my essay, is that what the boyfriend wins over is not actually the girlfriend. It's actually the idealized representation of the girlfriend that he wins over, that he possesses. So what's ironic about the whole situation is that the subject that wins over the desired object only wins over a representation. And this irony takes place within the fact that the subject bars himself. Like basically, he places himself in the friend zone by barring himself from the actual girlfriend. Now, this is a kind of play on like Hegel's work, where everything that you understand, everything that you know, basically is a notion. It's not until that notion fails that you start to realize that that was a notion. So that means when couples are fighting, boyfriend and girlfriend, the girlfriend has the potential to reveal the failed notion of how the boyfriend perceives the girlfriend, basically, right? And this can be the struggle with the relationship. And basically, the relationship between boyfriend and girlfriend, at least in a contemporary cultural setting, is the fact that we're always fighting, we're always combating and trying to alleviate, trying to somehow deal with our failed notions of each other over the course of time. So the significance of my article is essentially, at least the first part, is essentially that whether you get actually friend zoned or not, you still bar yourself ironically from another subject, from another human being, because you do not realize that the only thing that you actually possess about this person is the representation, is the idealization of that person, and not the actual person. And what's ironic about this also, which I did not talk about in my essay, is how we like to manipulate the subject into conforming to our own idealized notion about that subject. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that when I am in a relationship with a significant other, I have this certain image or understanding about them. And when that person fails to correspond to my understanding and image about that person, I try to reel them back in to once again match that correspondence. If you want a more clear example, this is like when you play this like matching game where you try to match an apple with an apple, right? You're trying to match how you think your girlfriend is like versus how she actually behaves. And when you perceive that she's misbehaving, you try to reel her back in and make her correspond to that same image that you have of her. So in reality, all you have is a possession of the representation. And that's why you don't actually possess the person itself. But this is actually the kind of tension between what eventually leads to like physical abuse, emotional abuse. This is when the person that feels he possesses the other is constantly trying to remedy this contradiction with the fact that the person that he is in love with does not correspond to his representation of how he thinks that person is, essentially. So yeah, that's like the main crux of like the first part of my essay, right? And then as we go later on, I start talking about AI. So the first part, I basically prove how not prove, but I basically argue how the friend zone in a very philosophical way is this barring. The subject, the person bars another person from satisfying their desire. But then I reveal, even if a person doesn't bar you from satisfying that desire, the only desire that's satisfied is the representation that is created by the person himself. Uh, and this is the kind of like illusion that is encountered in this kind of talk. So now that we go to AI, the significance of this portion is that I basically argue how the fear over AI is actually our fear over letting go of the representations that we possess, essentially. Like AI kind of forces our hand in letting go of a lot of these human semblances that we think is fundamentally human, fundamentally how a human is. And this is something that I'm always going to say, like repeatedly. AI will always make us rethink our current conceptions about the world. It's not that it destroys, but it makes us rethink and makes us want to redefine, what do we mean by human? What do we really mean? This concept of reality. What do we really mean when we talk about these things? Because I think that is where a lot of the fear is kind of in tension with when it comes to AI, is that we don't know. We don't know what that redefining is going to be like, because we've never really entertained like a real upheaval of all our concepts of understanding of what a human is, and where the human's being placed in the world is. But I basically argue in this essay that our concern over our own displacement by AI is actually our concern over the displacement of our possession of representations. Basically, and this is like probably the hardest part to even argue or to express more clearly in my essay, is that there's a kind of like a double mirage going on that is very difficult to express. And it's basically this: the concept of what we have as being human is a representation. And when AI are threatening that representation by owning that representation of what we consider being human or being more than human, is the double mirage. Meaning that, and this is this is the hard part to express. Meaning that the anxieties that we have over AI is the very threat it poses against our possession of these representations of what we think represents being human, of what we think represents a human doing work, a human having meaning, a human having place in the world. This is the double mirage that I'm talking about, and this is why it's more pressing than ever to start thinking about an onto-epistemology, because just preventing bad epistemology is not going to help us deal with our being, essentially, or what to do with our being. We only know what not to do, and we're sort of left in the void with what to do with our being. And I actually it took me a while to realize this with Caputo, because Caputo, he prevents bad epistemology just like any other postmodernist. But however, Caputo just sort of leaves metaphysics, ontology to just science or not science. He just kind of just leaves it open. But I think postmodernism has such an anxiety over ontology because it was rooted in bad epistemology that they just think like, okay, well, the whole point is to prevent bad epistemology. So let's just, the fear of like, it kind of resorts to like this regression where we're so afraid of failing again because of what we did with like World War I, World War II, that we're just afraid to make a move. Essentially, we're only critical about making moves, but we don't want to make a move. So that's basically postmodernism, in my opinion. Like the whole essence of it is like, okay, we're going to critique every move that's made because we don't want bad epistemology to happen. But then also, we're not going to make a move because that risks bad epistemology from happening, basically. But I think one of my favorite lines from Hegel is the fact that, we can't let the fear of failure sort of stop us from constructing a epistemology, a ontology as such. But I really do think there's a sort of kind of like ontological trauma that prevents us from once again trying to be courageous enough to construct an onto-epistemology to help us deal with this, because we're afraid of failing. We're afraid of having a bad epistemology possibly again, and rooting ourselves in the same cyclical features of history with war and so on, and all the disasters that came with World War I, World War II. Even Deleuze and Guattari, you can get this sense when they're trying to answer the reasons why the riots of 1968 even happened, why that whole thing even happened. So you can tell like there is an anxiety over bad epistemology coming to be, and that's what we need to be aware of, but also we should not let it stop us from being courageous to do something about it. So yeah, basically, at the end of this essay, I essentially say that what the AI ends up controlling is that the AI becomes an actualization of our semblances, of our human semblances, and then controls and takes over all human semblances. But the problem is with this is that the human being has predicated himself, his worth, his meaning, his place in the world on the possession of semblances. But of course, the difficult thing about this is that we don't know, or most people don't know, that these are human semblances, that these are human representations of what we think a human is, a human being should be, how a human being should find meaning. These are all semblances, representations of how we think a human is, acts, and thrives. And the threat of the AI is that displacement of all those semblances. And this is what I argue in my essay, the very displacement of those semblances. So this is the fear and anxiety over this, right? The fact that we're afraid, the fact that we're afraid that an AI has the potential to, one, look potentially so human that we would not be able to even discern possibly what that being is again our problem, in my opinion, over possessing the semblance itself, right? The very fact that we cannot even control, this is the ironic part, the very fact that we would not be able to even control how human an AI can possibly look if we were to do that. And this is the frightful thing, is that we're so used to having possession of appearances, of human appearances, of human desire, the appearance of humans. Actually, I'll put it in this way: the appearance of human desire, the appearance of human meaning, the appearance of human of just being there, that will all be in possession by the AI. And I think it proves that so because I basically argue only representations can be fully possessed. And so our fear of being displaced, our fear of losing control, our fear of about being lesser, is this fear of no longer having possession over these semblances, of these appearances. And unfortunately, we have not constructed a onto epistemology to sort of deal with this, to deal with this loss of coming to be a representation, that actually we will no longer be able to, at least this is my prediction. My prediction is predicated on like a full speculated to the extreme. Like if we just think like the most extreme possible, which would be like AI completely takes over. We have this apocalyptic, like human displacement. Human beings don't know how to be in the world because they've lost their identity, their meaning, their crisis, so on. I'm entertaining that speculation, by the way, so you understand where my assumptions are coming from. But my my assumptions are coming from this, that if human beings don't come up with an onto-epistemology to deal with the loss of not being able to be in possession of representation itself, then we are going to be in some, we're going to be in some dire stuff. At least that's my opinion. But it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's definitely hope. And I think a lot of that hope is kind of residing on our pure naked being. The thing is, nobody has taught us how to be in pure naked being, and when everything has been stripped of its semblances. So this is why onto-epistemology is more important than ever, because we just don't know. Just like was it? I have to read Viktor Frankl, Meanings, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl, he says something very important in this. He talks about how people didn't know how to suffer. And to me, like that is like the very embodiment of what I mean when I say onto-epistemology. Like we don't know how to be with pure naked being. Like we don't know that because we've predicated all of our knowledge, all of our understanding on semblance, on appearance, on what we think a human should act like, be like, on what a human being is perceived in the world, what humanness is. And I think this is what's ironic about that is that the representation of what we understand as being human is also not human. And I think that's the ironic aspect about AI, is that you're right. The reason why AI threatens what is human is because it's not human. It's because it's a representation. It's because it's a semblance of what we perceived and what we understood epistemologically as human, but it's not. And I think it sort of shows and proves that very idea of that threat, of that fear of displacement, of that sort of doom ideology that sort of surfaces when we start thinking about AI. But in my opinion, the real doom ideology is if we never realize that what the AI takes over is actually our possession of semblances. And that can be remedied, in my opinion, if we know how to deal with that loss of semblances. If we know how to deal with pure naked being. Immediately I'm thinking of Paul Tillich's Courage to Be. Martin Buber also has a very similar onto-epistemology about, sort of dialogical beings rather than knowing. And there's a way for Buber, in Buber's opinion, that you can play with semblances, you can play with the simulacrum to penetrate through, to penetrate through and reveal and have a glimmer of being, of naked being. So all these thinkers, and I know there's obviously place for Hegel too. So all these thinkers have something that can help us think through, what to do with representation. I don't think obviously getting rid of representation is the answer. I obviously I like Buber's method better, where you learn to play with semblances and simulacrum to reveal authentic being. And to reveal authentic being is to allow those things to transform you. There's actually a very wonderful example of onto-epistemology in one of Buber's first work, which is the Dialogues of Realization, called Daniel. I think it's part 5, called The Theater, where Buber compares the difference between the actor and the hero, where the actor is portraying the hero, but he's saying that in order for the actor to really portray the hero, the actor has to allow a transformation to occur within him. The most tangible example I have of this, to even make sense of people that maybe might not understand this concept, is Shia LaBeouf's recent conversion to Catholicism, to Catholicism, where he was in a movie portraying to be Padre Pio, the saint Padre Pio, and he said that by acting and being this saint, it completely changed his perspective. It completely basically transformed him, and now he has converted to Catholicism. So this is like a perfect example of what Buber means when he says that you can use the simulacrum, you can play with the simulacrum to kind of reach a glimmer of authentic being through it. By embracing it, you can penetrate through it. So in a way, Buber kind of offers a alternative to dealing with Kant's borrowing of the phenomenon, the noumena. And the only way that you can do that or penetrate through that is by this transformation, by this action. So it's deeply rooted in an ontology, because it's not about knowing for Buber. Like, you can't know, but you can know through the transformation itself, through the ontology of transforming. So I think this is why I appreciate Buber's thought on this a lot, because it basically reveals the importance of an onto-epistemology about what to do with our being, how to, and just like Frankl, teaching ourselves, constructing ways to know how to suffer. This knowing how to suffer, this knowing how to deal with the displacement of representation is going to be more important than ever, and definitely probably the demand of philosophy for our time period is discussing this, is exactly discussing this. An age of onto-epistemology, we're going to have to deal with this. And there's going to be obviously a lot of debate and disagreements, but I think overall the place is that onto-epistemology is the way forward in thinking about what to do with our being and representation, and how we should deal with that, play with that, rather than getting rid of it. I believe Deleuze wanted to get rid of it. So, but I only know that through Daniel. I don't really know that specifically through my own reading. I just know that I've only briefly read Deleuze a little bit here and there with Anti-Oedipus, but yes. Okay. All right. Hope you guys take care. Bye.